Hello, readers and writers. I'm MJ, and today let's talk about the problems with writing advice books. So, today I wanted to talk about trends that I have seen in writing advice books and trends that are not great and are not inclusive. Um, and to kind of frame this conversation, I decided we would kind of do it in a list format. So we're going to take a look at the 11 best books for writers to read, which is a list created by Barnes and Noble. So this list, I have not read all of them. I have, however, read a substantial portion. But I do think that even with the ones that I haven't read, this is a good way to kind of frame the conversation about what I want to talk about today. So, the first book on this list is On Writing by Stephen King. And this is an extremely popular book because, of course, it's written by Stephen King, who is seen as a master writer, not just horror writer, but speculative fiction in general, and just comes across as an all around pretty amazing and progressive person. Although we have seen in recent days that appearances are not always what they seem. So I will not speak for Stephen King in any way, shape, or form because I do not know him as a person. Um, but this is a very, very popular recommendation for writers to read. I have I have Stephen King on writing. I have read this book. Um, I think it was fine. I think I would recommend it more to people who enjoyed Stephen King's writing than to people who want to be a writer. And the reason for that is because it was almost more a memoir than um, writing advice. And the writing advice is problematic in the sense that it's kind of ableist. So Stephen King says very specific things about how to write, and they're based upon his process and years of experience. So, like, that should be respected, but that doesn't mean it is the only way to write. And individuals who are disabled, um, who have different needs, are going to have to take that into account when finding a way of writing that works for them. So, on this channel, I talk a lot about neurodiversity, specifically autism, and how common writing advice doesn't always work for us. And this is kind of another example of that. The sit down and don't leave your desk until you write 2,000 words isn't necessarily the best advice for people that have days that are up or down. Um, so I wouldn't say don't read this book. I wouldn't say this book is extremely problematic, but I also would say kind of take it with a grain of salt. The other thing about this book that personally irks me is the continued use of he or she instead of just using gender neutral pronouns. And I know that's a personal thing being non binary, but I do think it is extremely important to point out. So now, let's talk about the second book on this list, Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. Let's see. I have also read this book. Actually, only part of this book, I did end up DNFing it. And in these tabs, if you can see, I used two different colors. Blue was writing advice that I found helpful, and pink was advice that or comments in this book that I found problematic. Um, I've not read anything by Anne Lamott previously, and I will not pick up anything by her again. Um, so I want to make sure I get all the points for this book. So I made it 63 pages into Bird by Bird before calling it quits. So what I found in this book was a very crass writing style that basically um it basically excused the language that she used because other people were just too sensitive or were not going to just like her style. But someone's style can still be a problem. So she says, so the book is full of white entitlement. At one point, she says oddballs, ethnic people, theater people, poets, radicals, gays, and lesbians. They all put their effort into making her um, who she has, become. And like this expectation that hanging around these people, um, one made her eccentric, and two, that it was their job to do so. And it just comes across very much white entitlement, um, straight entitlement, like all sorts of just entitlement. Then she compares, first of all, she says that authors are not likely to get published, and you kind of just need to deal with that. And then she compares that to Native Americans, whether or not they were going to get smallpox blankets or not. Like, in no way, shape, or form is that appropriate. I was just, wow. Okay. So then she uses self unaliving as a punchline, like it was a joke. And she does this multiple times throughout the novel. Um, for example, one time she said, "You either type or unalive yourself," to talk about like the motivation of continuing to write. And while this may just seem flippant, if you have mental health issues and this is self harm is a concern, this kind of flippancy it's not acceptable, and just randomly come across it in a writing novel where someone could take that literally, and no one no one's life is worth not getting words on a page, and to just not understand how that's problematic. And it's not the only time that she does it. She does it continually throughout the novel. um she also talked about going and speaking to the manager, which, I mean, come on. Like, it's the epitome of white woman entitlement. And to be very proud of this and putting it in the book, I think um it says something that there are thousands and thousands of five-star reviews on the book on Amazon or any review site. I will also say that I tried to review this book on Amazon, and my review was taken down because I used quotes directly from this book that had language that was deemed problematic by the AI running Amazon's algorithm. So if I can't quote the author in the book in the review, doesn't that say that there's a problem with the book? And I couldn't get past 65 pages. I didn't want to get past 65 pages. Still having this book, honestly, makes me feel kind of creepy. I just haven't found the best way to get rid of it yet. Um, so yeah. Now, Novelist is a Vocation by Haruaki Murakami is a book that I absolutely want to read. It is also the only writing book on this list that is not by a white author. Murakami is, I believe, a Japanese fiction writer. I have read one of his books, and I have some others on my TBR to be picked up. The one I read was speculative fiction that I don't think I quite understood all of the deep meaning of it. But that's a me issue and not a him issue, which is why I want to continue reading in his work. And I absolutely do want to read this book to see a different cultural take on writing, um, because that's missing um, in these lists and in my own perspective. So this is one I absolutely do want to point out, and I'm very happy to see it on this list. Next, we have Save the Cat Writes a Novel, the last book on novel writing you'll ever need. I will say, this is not the last book on novel writing you'll ever need. People should continue to grow, so not a huge fan of that as a punchline. But I do own this book. I do regularly use this book. Somehow, in the move, I think it got boxed in with my TBR books because I had it with books I use, not books just sitting on my shelf. So I don't have it to hold up and show. I think this is a great resource. I know some of the criticism for it is it makes writing too formalistic, but for my brain, who needs to outline and add structure to a book, it puts structure into a story, allowing me to then put my own creativity around that. So I do like it as an idea, but I do also have criticisms of this book, and I wish I had it to show so I can do um, more in-depth criticisms of this book. But I will say that the reference books that are used in Save the Cat Writes a Novel are problematic. Beyond the HP references, which I'm not going to go into, I mean, it was written. Save the Cat was written in 2018, so I, I mean, it's not great that it's still being sold with that in there, but by itself is questionable, but maybe not like like it's questionable, but only questionable. But then the other stories that are used as examples in this book are pretty much all other all questionable, and they're all very white centric. Another book that was used in it is Me Before You. I have not read this book, but from what I understand, Me Before You has very problematic mental health rep in it. Um, so I'm a little iffy with recommending Save the Cat because, on one hand, I do find it extremely useful. And on another hand, it's pushing very problematic stories to then create the structure. The next is The Anatomy of Story, 22 Steps to Becoming a Master Storyteller. I have not read this either. I don't know if I'm going to pick this up or not. It is another example of, you know, a white male telling you how to write. And that, very similar to Writing Down the Bones, Freeing the Writer Within. I have not read it, but again, it is a white female writer telling you how to write. And we're back to a white male author telling you how to write the emotional craft of fiction, how to write the story beneath the surface. And the problem with these books, even though I have not picked these ones up, so I'm not specifically talking about these books because I have not read them. But when you look at who they're being written by, where you're learning how to write stories that are very white, straight, and potentially ableist, right? Like you're not learning racial nuances, you're not learning to put in neurodiverse perspectives, or if you do, how to do so appropriately and respectfully. You're not learning about getting sensitivity readers. in at least the ones that I have read to date. And so these are not always the best voices to be coming across, and for these to be the only voices, it kind of shows why publishing is so white, is so um so cis, so straight. There's even in the writing and telling you how to craft stories, there's not diversity, and that's extremely problematic. And all of this can be showcased in the book Story Genius: How to Use Brain Science to Go Beyond Outlining and Write a Riveting Novel. So, I picked this up. I was so excited to read this book that I went to the store and got it and then started rage writing in it, so I couldn't take it back. Um, this is a very problematic book, um, for multiple reasons. One, it's false advertising. How to Use Brain Science assumes that there's sort of science written into this book, and there is pseudoscience written into it. I have a master's degree in developmental psychology, which did require me to have graduate level coursework in neuropsychology, cognitive psychology, and such. Um, so I am not an expert, but I am definitely advanced enough to know when a book is talking about BS. And another way to tell that this book is talking about BS is because there are references in this book, and they're only literary references. There was no reference to any of the supposed science that was put into this book. So that is false advertising and already a huge red flag right there, which is why I kind of um, rage commented in it. Um, and then, but I kept reading because I Lisa Crone had such a flowery kind of language style that I was like, surely there's got to be something of importance in here. She's a literary agent. So it's a gatekeeper into publishing. Not that I plan on traditionally publishing, um, particularly because of reasons like this, but it is yeah, but it turns out Lisa Crone has never written a different book. This is the only book that she has written, and she wrote it telling you how to write, or the writer how to write. Um, the other concern about this book, major concern, there's a lot of minors. I did DNF it in case I wasn't very apparent on that, at about 100 pages, I believe. And there were examples of like relationships and love. First of all, love was seen as the norm, which is pretty common. And even as both an arrow and ace person, um, sometimes I just have to just suck that up. But there were very heteronormative relationships as well. So the one time that queer rep got put in this book, at least as far as I read, because this example is where I DNF'd the book. It was talking about a TV show that was being used as an example for like plotting or something like that. And it was talking about a man who was gay, or is gay, um, who was also a very conservative Christian. And in the show was playing at being straight because that was the only way that God would love him. And this is a very dangerous storyline to be presenting. And for someone who is not gay to present it, it should be done in a very sensitive manner. And it was not. It was done like, this is it, and here you go. And this should be like the normal almost. And so that combined with all the other things made me feel like this book is very anti-gay and very homophobic. And it made me sick to my stomach that I was so excited to read this, but also that it's seen as like such a popular book and such a an important one for writers to read, and yet it squashes the queer voice. So get that down. Let's let's keep going into this guide. So next we have the complete handbook of novel writing, everything you need to know to create and sell your work. This is bundled or edited by Writer's Digest Books. I have not looked at this book. Excuse me. And I do want to look more into this one. I'm hoping that it is more comprehensive because you do have several different authors in it, but I can't say anything to that effect. So next, let's talk about writing fantasy or fantasy and science fiction. This is a book that also has multiple writers in it, but is um the first portion and the bulk of the work is created by Orson Scott Card. Now, Orson Scott Card is already seen as a problematic author, specifically again for his homophobia. Um, I do know he is Mormon, which is the religion that I grew up in. So because I know um, how domineering that is and how easy it is to get sucked into that cultness of it, I tend to have a little bit more grace. Now I probably shouldn't. So I'm not saying anyone else should, but I do. So I did pick this book up knowing it was written by Orson Scott Card, or at least partially so, and um I have not read it. I did start it. I started the introduction that is again written by Orson Scott Card, and I put it down after that, trying to decide what was the best way to move forward with this book. And it wasn't even for like problematic content. It was just the audacity of him to basically say, now I don't have the book on me. I didn't pull it out for this video because it is packed in one of my TBR boxes. But so this is coming from my remembering and impressions of reading the introduction. But it basically said that you're picking this up because you don't know how to write and you want to learn from somebody who does. And it's like, do you not have any concept of professional development about continuing to grow? I just think the privilege and the that people have, that your way you can just know everything and be done with it, and not this continual growth process, which I think is fairly common for neurodiverse individuals, but specifically for those that are um, AFAB, non-binary, who are not male. And um, I was very thrown off by this. I put it down. I still haven't completely decided how to move forward with it because there are stories like and works in it by other authors, and I don't have to make that decision until I open up the box of TBR books that it's in. But for now, I'm not in a rush to make that call. But I was very put off by this book from the introduction alone. And next, we have next and last we have the Poets and Writers Complete Guide to Being a Writer, everything you need to know about craft, inspiration, agents, editors, publishing, and the business of building a substantial writing career. I have not read this. I'm probably a little put off on it because I don't know how much is poetry, how much is writing. They're two very different genres, and I am not a poet. um but it also again is written by a white male and female. So on this list, of 11 books, the only um writing book that was on here, there's only one that's not written by a white author. Um to my knowledge, none of these writers are queer. There's definitely anti-queer. None of them are neurodiverse, to my knowledge, and definitely have some that are um, an- anti-neurodiverse. So I guess ableist would be a good way to put that. Um, and it's a very problematic collection of writing books. So it's it is no wonder why publishing industry is still problematic, why it's still not accepting of diverse voices when this is what is being said they want writers to be. I don't know what should change first, writing advice books or what books are going to get published. I would assume the books that are getting published, but that's already happening. And it's not happening exclusively because of traditional publishing, it's happening because of self and indie publishing. And those voices actually having a space, such as the books that I put out, the books that I try and share by other indie authors, where I mean, publish. This is a prime example of publishing not accepting diversity at all. It's telling you what it wants in the writing books, and it is not diverse. Um, so I thought this needed to be addressed because I don't feel like it is. I don't. Maybe other people have talked about it, and if they have, please reference them down below because I would love to go hear their take as well. But in my spaces, um, I'm still hearing these books being touted as excellence and gold standards of writing when I'm picking them up and finding them to be extremely problematic. So I would love to um, have some more diverse writing books. I am researching that. I do know there's some specifically out there that are specific about writing like diverse characters and such, which is valid. I do want to at some point do like a continuation of this video where we do talk about writing advice books that are diverse. But I think it's going to be a little bit before we get there because I have to find them and read them. But if you know of some, please let me know down in the comments below. For me and for everyone else who is trying to find something that accepts diversity in the writing advice. So that is all for me today. Um, as always, keep writing, keep reading, and until next time.